The Wild West conjures up images of the final American frontier, as well as the famous gunslingers who lived there. The names of Wyatt Earp, Billy the Kid, and Wild Bill Hickok were once revered like contemporary sports stars, but their business was often violent and deadly. The American Wild West was a violent and bloody place, but these gunslingers have become immortalized in folklore and Hollywood. Although many of these legends are praised as heroes, they were all killers. No one made a name in the Old West without being a skilled gunslinger. Whichever side of the law you were on didn't matter when the dust settled. The winner lived to fight another day, and the loser got a grave. The stories of heroes and villains fighting it out on the dramatic Western landscape helped shape the history and culture of the United States. In today's video, we will take a closer look at some of the most prolific gunslingers of the Wild West. Please stay tuned as we unravel their stories woven with history and grandeur. Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp was one of the most famous gunslingers and gamblers in American history. He gained his notoriety for his actions at the Oakley Corral in Tombstone, Arizona. But this wasn't the starting point of his law enforcement career. Born in Illinois, he started with humble beginnings. As he worked his way farther out west, he held a number of law enforcement roles. Earp worked as a sheriff, constable, and even a deputy U.S. Marshal for a time. He also had other occupations as well. At certain points in his life, he was a professional gambler, brothel keeper, bouncer, and bartender. Earp was known all across the land because he traveled from each western boomtown, always looking for a way to make some quick money. He followed the boom all the way up to Alaska, where he made over $80,000 running a saloon, equivalent to about $2 million today. Of course, he was also one of the most feared gunslingers in the West. He was a renowned lawman, and the shootout at the Oakley Corral would help stamp his place in history. Earp, along with his two partners, Doc Holliday and Virgil Earp, came across 5 members of the notorious outlaw gang, the Cowboys. After the dust settled, 3 of the Cowboys had been killed, and the other 2 fled the fight, leaving Earp and the Marshals victorious in the battle. Wyatt Earp published an autobiography titled Wyatt Earp, Frontier Marshal, which became a bestseller. His story has also been widely portrayed in Hollywood, with several movies featuring this famous Wild West gunslinger. Billy the Kid. On the other side of the law, there are few more famous than Billy the Kid. Born William H. Bonney, he started a life of crime at an early age after he lost his parents when he was 14. Billy quickly learned how to fend for himself. He gambled and picked up odd jobs, always looking for the next way to make a quick buck. He actually became famous for stealing horses. After he had stolen enough horses from the U.S. Army, he decided to head out west, where he would get himself in more trouble. After murdering a man in Lincoln, New Mexico, Billy the Kid was indicted on murder charges. As he was being pursued, he killed a number of other men, leaving a path of death and destruction across New Mexico. Although he was captured, it wasn't the end of Billy the Kid. He managed to escape and killed 2 more deputy sheriffs as he made his exit. Billy the Kid became an outlawed fugitive with a $500 bounty on his head, and it was only a matter of time until the law caught up with him. Sheriff Pat Garrett in Fort Sumner, New Mexico, killed him. There are some legends that say Billy's death was staged, and he continued to live his life in the Wild West. In total, Billy the Kid killed 8 men on his murder spree. He solidified his name in outlaw lore and became a famous fugitive whose story lives on in Hollywood and TV. Wild Bill Hickok. Wild Bill may hold the title of the deadliest gunslinger in the whole West. He carried his two Colt 1851 Navy revolvers with ivory grips and nickel plating, which can be seen on display at the Adams Museum in Deadwood, South Dakota. He was known to wear his pistols in a cavalry draw, which could be equated to a reverse draw today. His style of carrying is something that can be equated to an inside-the-waistband holster that has been set up for a cross draw. He held every job that you could think of, starting his life as an outlaw and ending it as a sheriff. He was a gambler, actor, soldier, spy, scout, and marksman. Some say he fabricated many of his accomplishments, but no one could deny his larger-than-life personality. He was credited with killing over 100 men and was in a number of different gunfights. One of his most famous duels was with Davis Tutt, where Hickok shot the man at 75 yards, an impressive feat, even by today's standards. His wild ruffian lifestyle eventually caught up to him. Jack McCall shot Hickok in the back of the head while he was playing 5-card stud. The hand that Hickok was holding had one pair of black aces and a pair of black eights. This became known as the dead man's hand. His story wouldn't end there, however, as there have been a number of portrayals in movies, books, and stories. The legends of his wildlife live on today. King Fischer. John King Fischer was born on October 1853, just north of Dallas, Texas. The first time Fischer was arrested was for horse theft at 18 years old. He served 2 years in prison for it. After his release, Fischer began working as a cowboy, breaking horses. Because of the constant raids, lootings, and rapes of Texas ranch families by bandits, he soon found himself taking part in posse activities. He developed a reputation for being quick on the draw. In 1878, Fischer got into a heated argument with 4 Mexican cowboys. As the legend goes, he clubbed the nearest one with a branding iron. As a second drew a pistol, Fischer drew his own and shot and killed the man. He then spun around and shot the other 2, who evidently had not produced weapons and merely sat on the fence during the altercation. In March 1884, a quarrel broke out while he was out with a friend. A gunfight ensued, resulting in Fischer and his friend Thompson receiving mortal wounds, and at least 2 of the other individuals receiving light to severe injuries. Fischer and Thompson both died at the scene. He had openly admitted to killing 37 men. Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves was born into enslavement in Crawford County, Arkansas in 1848. His owner moved to Texas while Bass was still a boy. During the Civil War, Reeves's whereabouts were uncertain. There are several theories on the matter, one of which is that he attacked his owner and escaped. Either way, he became one of the first deputized African-American U.S. Marshals shortly after the Civil War and one of the most badass gunslingers in the West. While Reeves was an honorable man who fought on the side of the law, he was ruthless and relentless. Reeves killed 14 outlaws and apprehended more than 3,000 throughout his tenure, including his son, according to contemporary reports. Upon retirement in 1907, he became a city police officer in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Many speculate that Reeves inspired the fictional character, the Lone Ranger. To that end, a TV series was created about Reeves and his adventures. Jesse James. One of the most famous outlaws of the Old West, Jesse Woodson James, ran a gang of thieves in the mid-19th century. He was born on September 1847 in western Missouri. During the Civil War, he and his brother Frank James joined pro-Confederate guerrillas known as bushwhackers in Missouri and Kansas. As followers of William Quantrill and Bloody Bill Anderson, they were accused of committing atrocities against Union soldiers and civilian abolitionists. including the Centralia Massacre in 1864. After the war, he and his brother joined forces with another family to form the James Younger Gang. He is said to have killed at least 17 men during his lifetime, although some estimates put the number much higher. James was eventually betrayed by one of his gang members and shot in the back of the head while he straightened a picture on the wall. William Curly Bill Brochas. Curly Bill was so called because of his head of thick, curly black hair. After the death of Old Man Clanton, he became the leader of the Cowboys gang of cattle rustlers in Tombstone, Arizona. He also worked for a while as a tax collector for Cochise County Sheriff John Behan. Curly Bill was a heavy drinker who became even more rambunctious when drunk. One night, while drinking with other cowboys, Marshal Fred White asks him to give up his pistol. In handing the gun over to the marshal, it accidentally discharged, hitting White. Fred White, who had been friendly with Curly Bill, made a statement on his deathbed that he believed the shooting was an accident, and Brochas was acquitted. Wyatt Earp testified in his defense, but later shot and killed him in retaliation for the murder of his brother Morgan Earp. Sam Bass. Sam Bass started as an honest man. After running away from the abusive uncle who raised him, he went to work in a sawmill in Mississippi. His dream was to be a cowboy, and he eventually made his way to Texas. After one season, he decided he didn't like it. In 1876, Bass and a rough character named Joel Collins drove a herd of longhorns up north, where the prices for cattle were higher. They were supposed to go back to Texas to pay off the owners of the herd, but instead, they took the $8,000 profit for themselves. He and Collins wasted the money from the cattle drive on gambling in Deadwood. A few months later, he and Collins went into another venture stagecoach robbery. After holding up 7 stagecoaches, they didn't make much money. They set their sights on bigger prizes and turned to train robbery. Bass and his gang robbed the Union Pacific Gold Train from San Francisco, netting over $60,000, which is, to this day, the largest single robbery of the Union Pacific. He was wounded by Texas Rangers on the way to rob a small bank in Round Rock and died 2 days later on his 27th birthday. Belle's star, Myra Maybelle Shirley, was born in Carthage, Missouri. As a young lady, she attended the Carthage Female Academy, where she excelled in all subjects and became an accomplished pianist. She grew up with Cole Younger and later befriended the James brothers. When the outlaws of the James Younger gang needed to hide out, they often stayed at the Shirley family farm. It wasn't long before Maybelle was introduced to a life of crime and earned the nickname the Bandit Queen. In 1866, Belle married Jim Reed, a former Confederate Army guerrilla. Jim Reed tried to live the honest life of a farmer, but when that didn't pan out, he fell in with the Stars, a Cherokee Indian family notorious for stealing horses. Along with his wife's friends, the Jameses and Youngers, they planned and executed many daring heists. Jim was killed while trying to escape from the custody of a deputy sheriff who had arrested him for one such robbery. After the loss of her husband, Belle made a living by organizing and planning robberies, as well as fencing stolen goods. When she was unable to bribe the law into looking the other way, she would seduce them to get what she wanted. She married Sam Starr in 1880, and 2 years later, both of them were convicted of stealing horses. They were released a year later and went right back into lawlessness. Belle was murdered on February 3, 1889, 2 days before she was to turn 41. She was shot in the back while riding home from the general store. Her killer has never been identified. Thomas Coleman Younger. Cole Younger's life was forever changed when his father was murdered by Union Captain Wally. Mr. Younger had given Wally a severe beating for making advances on his daughter. Cole was already a member of Quantrill's Raiders, but after the murder of his father, he joined the Confederate Army. It is not for certain when he went into banditry, but the first time he was mentioned as a suspect was after the 1868 robbery of Nimrod Long & Coers, a bank in Russellville, Kentucky. Cole and his brothers formed a gang with Jesse and Frank James. They robbed stagecoaches, trains, and banks in Missouri, Kentucky, Kansas, and West Virginia. Luck ran out for the Younger boys on September 7, 1876, during a botched bank robbery. Cole and his brothers Jim and Bob pled guilty to avoid the hangman's noose. They were sentenced to life, but were paroled in 1901. Cole toured the nation with Frank James, giving speeches about the Wild West. He later became a Christian, renounced his criminal past, and died peacefully 4 years later, with 11 bullets still embedded in his body. The Sundance Kid. The Sundance Kid, Henry Longabaugh, earned his nickname when he was caught and convicted of horse thievery in Sundance, Wyoming. Despite his reputation as a gunfighter, he is not certain to have actually killed anyone. After his release from jail in 1896, he and Robert Leroy Parker, aka Butch Cassidy, formed the gang known as the Wild Bunch. They were responsible for the longest string of successful train and bank robberies in American history. Due to the pressure of the Pinkerton Detective Agency on their trail, Sundance, Butch, and Etta Place left the United States for Argentina to let things cool down. He is believed to have been killed in a shootout in Bolivia. Still, several family members claim he actually returned to the States, changed his name to William Henry Long, and lived in the small town of Duchesne, Utah, until 1936. Butch Cassidy. In 1879, at the age of 13, Robert Leroy Parker, Butch Cassidy, lived and worked with his family on the ranch of Jim Marshall in Circleville, Utah. It was there that he met his friend and mentor, Mike Cassidy, who gave Bob his first gun and taught him how to shoot. Years later, Bob would take his last name, Cassidy, as a tribute. His first run-in with the law occurred when he rode into town to buy a new pair of overalls. The general store was closed, so Bob let himself in, found a pair that fit, and left a note promising that he would be back to pay later. The merchant reported him to the sheriff, but he was acquitted of any crime. On June 24, 1889, he and 3 others robbed the San Miguel Valley Bank in Telluride, netting $21,000. With this money, he bought a ranch near the infamous hole-in-the-wall outlaw hideout. Parker, by this time, Butch Cassidy, was never a very good rancher, and it is believed to have simply been a cover for his illegal activities. At 1896, he became the leader of the infamous group of criminals known as the Wild Bunch, which included some of the most well-known outlaws of the Wild West. As with the Sundance Kid, it is unknown if he really died in Bolivia, or if, as some relatives claim, he returned to America. Tom Horn. Thomas Horn Jr. was a skilled gunslinger and a controversial lawman in the American Old West. Born in 1860, he rose to notoriety for his involvement in the Lincoln County War in New Mexico, where he worked as a hired gunman for cattleman John Chisholm. Horn's prowess with firearms and his unflinching determination made him a feared adversary, earning him the nickname Tommy. However, his later career as a Pinkerton detective truly solidified his place in Western lore. Horn was known for his unorthodox methods and willingness to bend or break the law to achieve his ends, leading to both admiration and condemnation from those who knew of his exploits. Yet it was Horn's controversial conviction and execution for the murder of a 14-year-old boy, Willie Nickel, that sealed his legacy in the annals of Wild West history. Many believed he was unjustly accused, citing a lack of concrete evidence and the possibility of a setup due to his reputation as a troublemaker for the powerful cattle and mining interests of the time. To this day, the story of Tom Horn remains shrouded in mystery and debate, a testament to the complex and often brutal realities of life on the frontier. James Killin' Jim Miller. Killin' Jim was an American outlaw and title-holder gunfighter said to have killed 12 people during gunfights. He was born in Van Buren, Arkansas, in October 1861. He grew up in Texas, and at 19, he was living with his widowed mother, siblings, and brother-in-law. On July 38, 1884, he shot and killed his brother-in-law after an argument. A legal technicality enabled him to evade a life sentence for the crime. Miller's next victim was lawman Joe Townsend. After much traveling, Killin' Jim became a saloon owner and a Pecos lawman. After Pecos, he joined the Texas Rangers, but inevitably, he became a professional assassin. He was contracted for a job in 2009, in which he left witnesses, and he was arrested shortly after that. The locals, fearing another acquittal, formed a posse and broke into the jailhouse early in April 1999. Miller and 3 cohorts were to be hanged. While his partners begged for their lives, Miller made 2 final requests: that his diamond ring be returned to his wife, and that he wears his black hat while being hanged. The requests were granted, and Miller reportedly shouted, "Let her rip!" and voluntarily jumped off the box. His body and the bodies of the other 3 men lynched that night were left hanging for hours until a photographer could be found to immortalize the event. John Wesley Harden. John Harden was born on May 26, 1853, in Texas. He was a known outlaw, gunfighter, and folk icon. Harden often got into trouble with the law from an early age. Arguably the most proficient slinger ever, he killed at least 21 men in gun duels and ambushes between 1868 and 1877. Raised in the South during the Civil War and Reconstruction, Harden was bitterly anti-black and anti-Yankee. At the age of 15, he killed his first man, an ex-slave, supposedly in self-defense. From then on, John led a life of shooting, gambling, and drinking. In the course of his career, he outgunned and killed at least 8 Union soldiers and 4 black policemen, pursuing him on various murder charges. Harden was caught in Pensacola, Florida. Returning to Texas, he stood on trial in September 1877 and was sentenced to 25 years. He was pardoned in 1894, and he then moved to Gonzales. But 1 year later, while standing on the porch of the Acme Saloon, he was shot in the back of the head by a former rival, Annie Oakley. Annie Oakley, born on August 1860 in Greenville, Ohio, may not have been a killer, but she was arguably the best gunslinger of the 19th century. At 8 years old, she made her first kill, shooting a squirrel from her front porch. Instead of turning to crime like many of our other shooters, Oakley put food on her family's table by hunting and even paid the mortgage on their house with money from the game she sold. When Annie was 15, she beat nationally recognized sharpshooter Frank Butler. Despite the age difference, the 2 married the next year and remained married the rest of their lives, dying 3 weeks apart. After seeing one of her performances, Chief Sitting Bull adopted her and gave her the name Watanya Cecilia, or Little Sure Shot. In the spring of 1898, when the threat of war with Spain loomed overhead, she told President McKinley, "In case of such an event, I am ready to place a company of 50 lady sharpshooters at your disposal. The outlaws of the Old West should be thankful that she wasn't a marshal. Annie Oakley was the quickest and sharpest draw of the era. On that note, we end today's episode. Thank you for joining us once again. We hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you will be the first to see our new updates.